Okay, and a couple of people will be joining little by little. So welcome everyone to day two. Thank you for being here again. And if you're here, it means that you're committed. It doesn't mean that if you're not here, you're not committed. Some people needs to catch the replay. I understand. But it's always good to be live because you're interacting with myself and you get to ask a question that pops up while you're listening to. So what I would like to do always is to sort of start by reminding everyone what this workshop is about, because I think sometimes or often when we get into the content of the workshop, we sort of get caught up with the detail and we forget about what this is about, right? And then I want to go over briefly, not taking too long, what we went over yesterday. So the 3-day immersion is on uncover your worthiness through self-love. And love is a topic that everyone loves. And self-love is loving ourselves. But I think one of the things that I am challenging everyone's sort of point of view is to put on the table the concept of self, right? And I'm going to get into a little bit more about that, sort of like a summary of what I talked about yesterday. But let's talk about worthiness, because worthiness is a mental idea that the judge that we have about ourselves, right? The evaluation, the value that we're putting on ourselves. And I think the key word is in relation to the world. And also, one of the things that I didn't explain yesterday is about everything is relative, right? Um, when we comes to worthiness, there is a fundamental assumption in all of us of what is considered to be big, what is considered to be small, what is considered to be more, what is considered to be less, right? What is superior, what is inferior, right? Those ideas is sort of fixed in our mind, right? So when we look at ourselves as a good enough, not good enough, it always, at the identity level, it always needs to be in relation to something. And in what we're going to be going today and also much deeper tomorrow is that when we tap into the level and the energy of the soul, which is beyond our mind and beyond the dimension of the body, there's no relationship, meaning that there's no comparison, right? The identity level wants to compare and to contrast, which is when we begin looking at that from a healthy point of view, it becomes healthy. But when we start looking at from the fear point of view, it becomes unhealthy. So we're going to be talking more about that. So I think one of the sort of proposal slash challenge that I really wanted to convey on day one, which was yesterday, was to really help everyone, including myself, because when I say something and when I explain, it kind of confirms to myself, right? Is to reevaluate the definition of self, because uncover the worthiness, right? The sense of worthiness and the self-love that we often talk about is an intellectual idea, right? We think that, well, the feeling of worthiness and the good enoughness comes from our feeling, but we always think about it, right? The feeling provokes to create certain thinking, the thought about it, right? And it's a conceptual idea. Does that make sense? And the self that we're performing, I'm just going to use intentionally the word performing in this physical world, is an idea, it's a psychological idea. And the psychological idea can often become an illusion. And what I mean by illusion is that when you change the way you look at it, it shifts its meaning and also the value of it, right? So for a lot of us, the environmental and genetic conditioning that we receive from early stage of our life, and the genetic programming that we're receiving from our ancestors uh, is living in our body as a form of reflective memory, reflection of our memory, and that causes us to feel in a certain way about ourselves, right? And there's a feeling in there. But the reason that I really wanted to focus on our thinking yesterday is because I truly believe in, I am convinced that that is the gateway. So there's a two-way street, as I said yesterday. Thinking causes us to feel something. And when you feel something long enough, it becomes our belief. Now, when we have a certain belief at the subconscious level, we are holding on to a certain reflection of our feeling, the memory in our body, which causes us to automatically and habitually think a certain thoughts, right? So it's a loop of going from thinking to feeling to belief and coming back to belief to feeling to thinking. But the gateway to get out of this trap is our intentional thinking that we can choose, because that is our awareness, right? That is the reason that I wanted to sort of fully navigate everyone's attention to the judge, the observant, the one that is thinking about you. And that is an idea about you that is just another thought, right? So, what does it mean for all of us to be told that yourself and the sense of worthiness that we might be entertaining is nothing but just another thought? So we tend to sort of make this worthiness thing, self-love thing, a huge thing, but it's, I'm just gonna repeat again, it's just another thought, right? And we can change that. And that is the place that we want to begin shifting in order for us to begin changing the entire feeling about how we feel about ourselves, and essentially to change the belief. Because when we change the way we see ourselves, the observant, we can change our belief. And when we change our belief, everything begins changing. And then, the manifestation and law of attraction and how we can create our life, including the health and the relationship and the working environment and the finance, is not the primal focus on this 3 day. But when we understand that we live in the quantum universe and how the seed of the quantum universe is in our thought level, in our belief level, in the non-physical level, by understanding that mechanism and the nature of the world that we live, we can choose to become a creator instead of a little negative term is a victim, right? When we let go of or drift away from becoming consciously aware of our capacity to choose our thoughts, which is our free will, we can become our creator, right, of our own life. So that is a little bit of the background info, along with what we talked about yesterday. And I'm going to go ahead and make this a full screen, going to today's topic. Okay, so day 2 is all about understanding what self-love is. And it's going to be an extension of what I talked about yesterday, but my goal is to help you have a clear understanding of what self-love is, and use that knowledge and the practice that comes along with it to be able to love yourself fully. Because when you love yourself fully, everything becomes non-resistance, right? If there's no full love for yourself, it means that there's an energetic stagnancy in your vibrational being, and we're vibrating at high speed all the time. And depending on the quality of the frequency that we're vibrating, we are attracting things that we want, things that we do not want, including in the area of health, relationship, finance, work, all that. So the two selves that I want to introduce today is the personality self and the essential self. So we're talking about self-love, right? And there are two selves. So when we talk about self-love, who is the self that is loving and who is the self that is being loved? So personality self, some people, or actually there's someone named Antonio Damasio. I don't know, I can't remember if he's a neuroscientist or what that role is, but he uses term autobiographical self, which is the sense of self and the concept of self that we are creating in our mind based on our autobiographical history, which is the personality self. But another way that we can identify what this self is basically the self that is coming from our mind, the thoughts that we think that identify ourselves as somebody in relationship with the world. And the essential self that I really want to navigate people more into is the soul. And we're going to get into more of that, right? The soul has a pure energy of no judgment and no negativity. And I'm not going to say that negative is bad. Negative is, hold on, someone is trying to come in here. Negative is a contrast. Negative is a contrast. So there's something called law of polarity. Now, earlier, what I talked about was more of the law of relativity, right? People have this sort of like fundamental assumption of looking at things as bigger, smaller, more or less, right? More capacity, more health, a deeper love. They have a scale internally that they measure, right? Um, and that is in our mind. Our soul, the essential self, doesn't know how to um, contrast and compete because it's a pure love and it's just is, and it consists of happiness. It consists of uh, all that feeling energy of love, right? So going back to the personality self, the mind that thinks, that creates a sense of identity about you, is dynamic. Now, what does that mean? It means that it's not determined. And this is actually a good news because whatever the feeling that you might be having currently about yourself, and also the type of thinking that you have to identify you, because how you see ourselves is a collection of our thoughts because we think in picture, right? And dynamic means that it's plastic, right? There's a term called neuroplasticity, and epigenetics is the gene version of the neuroplasticity, which is the gene is not determined. These traits, the 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 patterns of the thinking that we think is not determined. Our belief is not determined. In fact, what Bob says often is that most of the beliefs that we're operating from have no foundation because we inherited those beliefs when we were little, right? And the dimension, the self of the soul is absolute. There's no necessity of changing because it's just is. And the personality self is a collection of our story and the story that we tell ourselves, and the essential self is a medium. This is an interesting um, way to describe the reason that I'm saying and referring to medium is because, and I don't want to lose you with this thinking, is that when we understand that we're a spiritual being having a physical experience, not the other way around, right? We're not a physical being. We are a spiritual being having a physical experience. We are forever present spiritual being with the temporally physical experience, right? And what that means is that the human body gets born, and we all know that people die. Um, but here's the thing, though: if you are, if you're those people, well, most of the time I attract people who are already have some sort of interest, curiosity, and open-mindedness in the spiritual dimension. So when I say essential self, the soul, absolute, people do not have too much resistance. But if you are one of those people who are sort of scratching your head right now and then thinking, what is this guy talking about when I say essential self, the soul, absolute? It's interesting because everyone nods their head when I say you need to follow your passion in order for your soul to fulfill, right? And people nod their head as if they understand what soul is and as if they know about the soul. But often when I start talking about the soul and when I ask question about the soul, people look at other people to almost seeking as if they want somebody else to answer that question, whatever that is. So that is an interesting thing, right? Everyone understand and relate with this idea of you want to follow your passion in order for you to fulfill your soul. But nevertheless, not many people wants to explore the topic of the soul in detail because it's invisible and it's not tangible, right? But my explanation to that is that your personality self in the mind and your thinking was developed later in life, right? Like when we, each one of us was an infant, we only knew how to cry. Maybe we knew how to smile, but we didn't have an ability and a capacity to speak a language. Now, if you don't know any language, how would you think? Does that make sense? Can you think a thought without knowing any language? So you didn't know any language, and I'm very sort of sensitive or open to this topic because I was exposed to Spanish language when I was 2. So I almost feel like I learned how to speak Spanish before I started to learn how to speak Japanese. In English, something that I learned later, right? But you get the point, right? Like each and every one of us didn't know how to speak language. It means that we didn't know how to think, have that internal narrative and a conversation inwards. We didn't have the ability to do that, but our body knew how to operate, right? Now, what is moving our body? What is making our body alive when we were not able to think anything and use language? So that is an interesting question. So I like to do that sort of like a elimination sort of strategy in order to help people who are newer to the concept of essential self and the soul, that there is an intelligence that is operating our body and also the entire nature and the environment, the earth, right? Because the earth is a living organism and nature is living organism. Humans are living organism. What is this intelligence that's moving us that is beyond our mind, the intellectual capacity to think and to be able to speak any language? So that intelligence is our consciousness, and that is what operates as a level of the soul. The way that I look at it is that consciousness is the operating system. Some people call that a mind, but often, we say the mind as an intellectual ability to think. Now, the soul is an individuation of the collective consciousness, which you can call spirit or infinite intelligent, infinite universal intelligence, and a soul is the medium. This is where the medium comes in. The medium of the infinite universal intelligence, collective consciousness, spirit, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter what you call it. But the soul is a medium for that infinite intelligence to express through us. And we were given the body, the human body, to experience this physical world, the 3D, to express our individual, unique soul desire in whatever the desire that we have within us, the life that we want to be living, the calling that we might have, the sense of gratitude, overwhelming gratitude that we all um, feel almost like a blissful to go there. Those are all inner desire that we have as a unique soul. So the bigger infinite intelligence can express through us. And I have been convinced by now that that is the meaning of life, right? That is the meaning of life. Meaning that when we wake up and when we begin understanding that we're bigger than the human body, we're bigger than the human mind, human body is a vehicle to experience this the spiritual beingness in the physical world, and the mind is a tool. A lot of people assume that they are the mind. They get trapped into their thinking, they get trapped into their feeling, they get trapped into their belief and emotion, even though our thinking, feeling, emotions, and beliefs are not our true nature, the essential self, and it's dynamic, meaning that we can pick, select, and choose to think any thoughts that we want to be thinking, anything that we want to be believing, and any emotion that makes us feel good. But we tend to have a habitual tendency to go into the default thinking, default belief, default feeling, emotions, because those are rooted into our subconscious mind that we inherited through the genetic and environmental conditioning. And I don't want to go too much ahead of this topic, but I think I'm going to. This is more of the topic of tomorrow. But every single one of us go through this conditioning of receiving some gift to, some people have positive conditioning, right? Like for instance, one of the positive conditioning that I have received, I guess I'm going to say two, is that my father is so optimistic. I'm very optimistic. My mother is very empathic slash sensitive in a positive way. I am very sensitive, empathic in a positive way. I got that from my two parents. My father used to have a tendency to yell at the TV when some sort of like a political TV was running, and when the view of that politician was not congruent with my father. I went through some anger moment when I was little, right? My mother tends to be worried about something, right? I went through some worry moment, right? I have turned my attention inwards to change myself. So the anger and the worriness doesn't affect too much. I think I have less of the anger. Maybe some worry stuff shows up once in a while, but I learned how to handle those. But you know what I mean. So there is a positive conditioning that I received, being optimistic and sensitive in a good way, to be able to understand people and situation. That was a positive impact. And I also received negative impact. Now, each and every one of us is supposed to receive both, because that is where the beauty of the law of polarity comes in, right? So fear and love, fear and faith, darkness and light, all those are the nature of the physical world. We are supposed to, we're supposed to might not be the best terminology, but well, actually, we're supposed to, we're not designed to, we're supposed to go through some sort of emotional trauma or stress or pain in our life so we can become aware of the fear-based energy that exists in the world. Then, only then, we can work on turning into our light and love and all the good things that we want to experience. Yeah. Um, it might sound super good to have all the time sunshine and perfect weather, but I don't think we would appreciate as much as we do and enjoy the sun and perfect weather, whatever the perfect weather is for you, if we did not have storm, dark, night, and all that. Does that make sense? So the law of polarity is fundamental in nature, in the three-dimensional physical world. And the emotional component of the low polarity, by us going through some, trauma, fear, darkness, is designed as our own destiny for us to move back into our essence. And that is the lesson that each and every one of us is receiving on this earth. So going back to medium, because that's the slide that I have in front of me right now, is that we are a medium. The soul is a medium for the greater part of us to be able to express through. So if there are two selves, the personality, the autobiographical self, the intellect, the thinking self, and the essential self, there must be two loves, right? And then I was surprised that I chose this picture that has two loves when I wasn't planning to talk about two loves, but then I realized that there are two hearts in there. So the ego-driven love, and I don't want you to misunderstand that ego is a bad thing. Ego is our identity. Ego is what wants to contrast. Ego is what wants to compare, right? In a soul-inspired love, the ego-driven love has two aspects. When it's driven by fear, we get attached to something, somebody, and love becomes all about receiving. And because when you're attached to, you're in a state of fear, you're focusing on not receiving, and you will be in the energy of fear. So when the ego-driven love gets attached to something, you move from the energy of love into an opposite polarity called of fear. So it's no longer love, right? Now, but what's inevitable is that in the physical world and at the psychological level in the physical world, we are relational, right? So what I often say is that our sense of individual self, the concept of self that we form and construct in our mind, always happens, and we create that image and picture because of the relationship that we have. Each and every one of us is a child of our mother. And if you have siblings, you are sibling, brother, sisters of brother, sister, and you have some relationship, right? Work relationship, family relationship, friends relationship. You have an unconscious way of identifying yourself in that context, relating with people, other people. You wouldn't see yourself the way you're seeing currently without any other people around you. That's what I mean, right? And when you're able to stay in the relational energy, not attached energy, love becomes giving and then receiving, and it becomes healthy, right? And the soul inspired love, on the other hand, doesn't have any relationality or attachment. because when you are able to tap into the energy of the soul, soul is love, and love just is without any condition. So, giving and receiving is fun, right? Giving and receiving feels good, but that is more of the a three-dimensional relationship based creation of love. And when we transcend our state of being from the mind into the level of the soul, from the personality self into the level of essential self, love doesn't need any condition or external influence, but just is. It's a feeling of oneness. And the feeling of oneness can be accomplished by aligning with the energy of the soul, which is energy of the soul is all the things that each and every one of us seeking: the sense of freedom, the sense of happiness, the feeling of gratitude. You feel one with something greater than our personality and the animal body that we have. And when we are there, love just is. It's not about giving, it's not about receiving, but love is. And in conjunction with what I mentioned earlier about the reason that we came on earth, is I think, on the left side, when you see the personality self, on the right side, you see the quality and the experience of the essential self. Life in the three dimension is all about taking that relational love, giving, receiving, to align and match with the energy of the soul. We need both. We have two loves. We want to give and receive through the relationship, and we also want to be able to tap into this is the unconditional love, the unconditional self-love that you do not need any external condition. How do we do that? We do that by eliminating any judgment or thinking, because any condition that you might need, you might be assuming that you need, is also just another thought. So when we are able to see the essence and the fundamental beauty of who we are beyond our rational thinking, beyond the dimension of the mind, you will align as a state of being through the feeling that you experience to the oneness of what love is all about. And I know that I am explaining, maybe for some people, that might sound something complex. And then when the soul and the love that is unconditional, does not need any condition, is something beyond intellectual, if you start interpreting and try to understand and absorb something unintellectual intellectually, it will never work, right? So I think my invitation would be to sort of kind of listen to what the gut is experiencing right now. Listen to what the heart is talking to you right now, and to shut off the mind because the mind is our greatest gift, and it can be the biggest enemy. um the mind, when we are able to, I really like to say that the mind is our tool, the body is our vehicle, right? And when we understand that the mind is the tool, and when we are able to, by choice, by free will, detached from our mind, and to be one with the energy of who we are at the essential level, which is the soul, which is the oneness, which is the love, we will be able to utilize the tool so effectively to create the life. It's like let's say life is a canvas that we can paint however we want to. The the painting brush and the colors are the mind. And if we don't understand that the mind is a tool, and when we begin misunderstanding that the we are the mind, the thoughts, we don't have any control over. And then when we get trapped into that mistake, we start focusing on the outside world, and when we begin misunderstanding that a lot of bad thing or life stuff is happening to us, right? I might have said this yesterday, but life never happened to us. Any adversity, anything that is challenging, everything is happening from and through us. It cannot be otherwise, because we are not physical being. We're a spiritual being. We're having a temporally physical experience. And if that is true, life must happen from and through us, not to us. It cannot be otherwise. It doesn't make sense if something happening to us. So this is a graph that I put together just to sort of show you what I just explained, right? There's a personality self, there's a soul level, essential self. And the personality self is dynamic and creative, means that when we don't understand that the personality self, the thoughts that we think and the concept of self that we entertain in our mind is dynamic, we start misunderstanding that it's fixed, right? And the reason that I like to say creative is because it's changeable, right? So you can create through what you choose to create. And the self in the level of the soul is absolute, and it's our essence. Now, at the personality level, love is about giving and receiving. And when the relational dynamic change to attachment, it becomes fear-based, and you start wanting to give because subconsciously you want to receive, and not you start focusing on not receiving because you're afraid of not receiving, and that becomes a fear, right? That is no longer a love. And of course, at the soul level, love doesn't need anything but just is. Okay, now what do we mean to love our personality self? Because let's come back to the topic of this immersion, which is uncover your worthiness through self-love. Now, what does it mean when we say self-love, and when we are now sort of becoming aware that there are two selves, personality self at the thinking level, and the essential self deep inside of our heart, because your heart is the gate that the soul can shine through. That's why we say open and close the heart. When we're in a state of gratitude, we're allowing the energy of the soul to be able to show up in the three-dimensional physical world. Um, but when we have the heart closed, we're not letting that energy to come out in the world. And that's when things becomes fear-based, and the vicious cycle of worry and doubt and adversity, all that start happening because your heart is closed. So what do we mean to love our personality self? So self-love and forgiveness goes hand in hand, and I think most people agree with that. And forgiveness, we usually use forgiveness or think and talk about forgiveness when there's some sort of negative incidents, situation, or relationship happen in the past, right? And we often use and say, forgive this person or this something, right? Forgiveness is never about the outside, but it's about releasing the feeling that we're holding onto in ourselves. And let's say, let's say this is just an example, right? Out of nowhere. Let's say if you grew up being told that you are not worthy, right? By somebody, by your mother or somebody close to you, it's going to be so difficult to love yourself, because now somebody who you thought that would be a trustworthy, who is your mother, start telling yourself that you are not worthy, right? So there's going to be a internal conflict inside that you start feeling, okay, I want to sort of expand because our soul wants to expand more and have a fuller expression. But now at the personality level, you are identify that you're not worthy. Then your thinking and the feeling will be congruent with the energy and idea that I am not worthy. And later on, when we get to adult, you become aware that that was your past, and there might be some sort of feeling about your mother inside because that's how you were treated, right? Now, what does it mean to forgive? It has nothing to do with the mother, because the mother who treated you as somebody who is unworthy is just an external trigger. And in it is an external trigger. At the same time, if you were told something like that before the age of 6 and 7, you didn't have the conscious ability to reject that idea. Subconscious mind can only accept the idea. So automatically, you end up accepting that idea that your mother insisted. That information that the information doesn't have to be words, but it's like a behavior that indicates the feeling, how they were seeing or your mother was seeing yourself, that becomes ingrained in your subconscious mind, right? So now you have this sort of feeling that provokes the idea and thinking that I am not good enough, I am not worthy, and I am not even qualified to love myself, because that is the identification, right? So forgiveness in this sense is nothing to do with the mother, but it is about acknowledging and identifying that you ended up accepting that idea. You ended up accepting that idea. And if this happened before the age of 6 and 7, you didn't know how to reject. So you only knew how to accept. So it's just a life sequence event that was not avoidable for the mind of you. But, um, you now know through this, talk and all that, how the mind works, right? Now you have a conscious choice and ability to think that that might be nested deep in my subconscious. Now, the first step, I think I have, the first step is to, for a lot of people, self-love, they all talk about love no matter what and love the way it is, right? And to be able to let go of the judgment and embracing what is, which is correct, right? So if I combine what I mentioned yesterday, was that it's not about who you are that needs to be changed, but how you're seeing yourself, the judge, the observant, right? That's where the gateway is. That's where the visual cycle can be shifted into a positive spiral. So you do want to be able to, so loving no matter what and love the way it is not really about accepting yourself, but it is about neutralizing how you're seeing yourself. Because it's not about the one that is being judged, but it's about the one that is judging. This is from yesterday, right? It's a subtle shift. So I want to sort of go slow for people to be able to absorb this, and letting go of the judgment and embracing what is comes from how you can monitor your thinking, the judge, right? So self-love and forgiveness is not about forgiving somebody outside, but to be able to see ourselves once accepting, meaning that to acknowledging what happened in the past and to understand what is happening in our system, and to be able to begin shifting the way we see ourselves. Now, often forgiveness is used to let go of the past, right? Now, if you just let go of the past, forgiveness is incomplete. Forgiveness is going to be completed when you, second phase, give you permission to fully become who you desire to be. Forgiveness and self-love is always going to be completed in the personality level when you give yourself a permission, acceptance to become who you want to become. It cannot be otherwise, because your soul that is here on earth is seeking a constant fuller expression, right? And you can imagine that through the conditioning, that the way that you were treated before, that expression got interrupted. So the natural state of us in this world is to go after the life that we want to be living, acknowledging our desire and our want and the freedom that we want to experience. It's just like flower, right? Flower, once you plant the seed, it just grows the way the flower wants to grow. So each and every one of us came on this earth with some excitement at the soul level, with the urge of wanting to express fully, and with all that genetic and environmental conditioning in the way that we were communicated through words and gesture and all that, the energy of the soul of expressing outwards got interrupted. And when we forgive and let go of the past by shifting the way we judge and neutralize that judgment, now we are back in the starting point. But the forgiveness, true forgiveness, is going to be completed when we go to the next step, which is the phase 2, to give yourself a full permission to become who you desire to be. I'm repeating all this so it sinks into everyone a little bit more, right? So does that make sense? There are 2 phases in forgiveness and self-love. In order for us to love ourself, the personality self fully, we want to go after the potential that we desire to be, instead of just accepting whoever that is that we are becoming right now. It doesn't stop right now, but actually it never stops. But we want to continue to go after our desire so we can express fully. It means to accept the ideal. Whatever the desire that you have of who you want to become, to be able to feel expressing yourself fully, to decide to accept the ideal version of ourselves. And the ideal version of each of ourselves is an innate desire that uniquely each and every one of us has. And it's different with every single person. And that desire comes from the divine, which is, the more you accept the ideal, the more you are allowing the spirit, the infinite intelligence, to be able to express through you. And that is when you match the energy of your personality to the energy of the soul that is seeking expression to be able to become one with the infinite intelligence. That's when the deeper self-love will be expressed, because that is the reason, the destiny, and the reason that we're here. Ooh, that was the last slide. So I know for some people, or maybe many of you, that information might have been overwhelming. But my intention was to keep as a minimum slide. And then we're not talking about so many different things. I think you, by now, you might be realized that I'm talking about something simple, but not many people are thinking about often from different angle. So it gives you some insight and aha moment. So the daily reflection that I would like everyone to experiment is to ask this question: how does it feel to embrace the entire history of you with no judgment, including all the negative stuff that happened, right? So you can list all those and begin looking at it as from the lens of no judgment. And then when you look at it from the no judgment place, I want you to identify what feeling might provokes and how would you call that feeling and what is the quality. Because that no judgment in your entire history and embracing that is going to give you a gateway and a sense of freedom to be able to begin moving into accepting the ideal. So I hope that is clear. And I think this is the last slide for today. And what I'm going to do is to sort of hop off the screen sharing. I'll stop sharing. And let me know if you have any questions. And just like yesterday, you can type on the chat, or if you feel comfortable unmuting and then asking questions through your voice, that is also an option for you. And I know that sometimes or often when I ask this question, people need some time to think about what question you may have. So I'm going to wait for maybe 15 seconds if you have any.
Yeah, I just I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just really love your clarity, and I really just want to say I really appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
For
Who is this? It says your name is iPhone right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is John. I'm a graduate of
From Hawaii?
JFK. Yeah, and I'm from Hawaii. Yes.
Oh yeah, that's right. What time is Hawaii right now?
It must be about 4:30 or something. 3 hours difference.
PM, right?
Yeah, PM. Yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad you were able to join live. I know you missed it today.
Yeah, that was it. I have to do it earlier.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, for me, I would say that you're really eloquent. You really have it. And I was going to say, if you took some time out to do some reflective pieces or explain some of the details of some of the things that you're talking about, I think it's going to deepen your work, because you remember all the exercises we did in the program. You know how they pushed us really hard to really be able to share and help people.
Yeah.
And being able to have some that you do breakout groups and things like that, but taking a few minutes to just make a sound when you feel your soul purpose, or is there a sound you want to make? Let's just take a couple minutes to do that. Or because you have gifts. I mean, this is great what you're doing. And is it okay to share? I mean, this is just
by the way, if you're looking for something experiential, I think I said yesterday, I haven't announced yet, but there's a last day tomorrow, and I'll be doing a workshop of self-image transformation on Saturday, 8 a.m. in the morning, Pacific Standard Time. So I'm going to send out an email tomorrow and then post on the Facebook group so people are aware of it. Usually I send out a bonus video, but instead of doing that, I decided to do an experiential. So on Saturday, it's going to be like 45 minutes. I'm going to be taking people through an experiential exercise that they can do there. And also people can do the replay, but yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And then that's something that they can, have at different portions, different steps along the way. You talked about people being dreamed up. That was very interesting. I mean, you, I've just summed it up by saying dreamed up. You didn't use that terminology, but and yeah, so that was just for me. I was just I was feeling like there could be some experiential
Uh-huh.
pieces in there, and yeah, I feel like this is a very important topic,
This is a
and
super
wake
important.
everybody up. And you know, there's so much more to us than what we're dreamed up with, or what roles we're in, or
Uh-huh.
and whatnot. Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, John. Anybody else? Question, comments, insights, complaints?
Hi, it's Michael.
Hi, Michael. What time is
I
there
would
right now?
just, it is almost 12:30 Wednesday in Tokyo.
Tokyo. Welcome from Tokyo.
Yeah. So I think also, aside from trying to understand all this for myself, is also trying to step back and reflect on when I'm talking to people
Uh-huh.
who I'm having the conversations with or the love relationships with, because I find that when we are having troubles is because they also aren't understanding necessarily where their thoughts and feelings and interpretations of themselves are coming from.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of twofold, where I'm, not struggling, but constantly reminding myself of the principles you're talking about, but then also trying to teach the other person to kind of bring us to the same page.
Yes. Yes. To be able to, interesting, because I was talking about something related to what you're saying with somebody else yesterday, where how do we communicate with people who are not open to this sort of idea, or those who are not maybe ready to hear, right? That's what you're talking about, like to the usage of the language, and to be able to, but first of all, you know that if somebody, um we usually have an intuition that I can talk to this person this way based on the prior conversation, right? So um I tend to go full out and talking in a way that I like to say, in the way that I see in the world. But that doesn't mean this sounds ironic. That doesn't mean that in my personal life or when I talk to people, I advise people exactly the way I'm talking to, if that makes sense. Because I also, one of
I
the,
always wondered.
yeah, because one of the things that I also, positive conditioning that I got from my mother, is that I'm highly intuitive, so I can sense what words I need to use for this person to understand what I'm talking about. And I think in that context, sometimes or even often, I need to let go of the idea or desire of wanting to, actually, I don't have any desire of needing to be exactly on the same page. I think I sort of learn how to not to be in that space, if that makes sense. But because I understand when I speak with anybody, as far as the consciousness and awareness where the person is, so I can just sort of honor, acknowledge and honor where the person is. And if there is something that I need to address because it's impacting the relationship, um, I choose specific language. And I think the threshold of the balance, right? It's a dance, right? How much do I want to say this? How do I say this? And often, um, depending on the situation, often time resolves the situation without saying anything, and say just enough things that you want to say, and the other person hear not the content, but the energy of you. And then when you stop talking, the time just kind of solves the relationship. That's my experience. I don't know if that resonates with you, Michael, but.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Are we good?
This kind of reminds me of, like, you know, if you're in a relationship and there's all these expectations on you, and you're there to be supportive and loving, to just come from that place.
Yeah.
And and then just, you know, I'm just here to support you and love you, and you can even point out those expectations, needs, whatever they are, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's not like you're responsible for that person's expectations or needs or wants, or you're a failure, or whatever the programming you had when you were a kid was all about. None of that really necessarily do you have to accept, is what I guess what you're saying, right? You don't have to.
Yeah. Well, as far as what you just said, John, what I always talk about, and some people here might have heard me saying, is I always insist what Don Miguel Ruiz. I don't know if you know the book Full Agreement, The Fifth Agreement. The Fifth Agreement is one of my favorite books. If you haven't read that book, that's my top 5, one of my top 5 books, The Fifth Agreement. He's known as an author of Four Agreements, but he talks about, so first of all, he talks about nobody's responsible for your feeling, right? And that, embodying that concept on a day-to-day basis can transform everything, because whatever somebody tells me, that person said something with the level of awareness that the person is in, but the feeling that I created from within was 100% based on how I perceived it, right? So that takes the victim out of the way, and you become 100% responsible for your feeling. Nobody else is responsible for anybody else, but each person is responsible for their feeling, right? And Don Miguel said that, how does that work in relationship, in an intimate relationship, right? He said that each person is 100% responsible for the 50% of the relationship. So if you are talking about the intimate relationship stuff, we do need to have some sort of conversation around it. But that single idea that nobody's responsible for others' feeling is huge, because I think what I see out there is everybody wants somebody else to be responsible for their feeling, right? And if you're seeking the responsibility for the feeling that you created with somebody else, and the two people are seeking that to one another, you will never get anywhere. But both parties have that agreement that, oh, you told me this, but I interpreted it that way, and the way that I felt has nothing to do with what you said, but it's the way that I perceived it. And if you say the way you said it and it sounded aggressive, that has everything to do with the other person's awareness, and it has nothing to do with me. Does that make sense? So that way of thinking, that angle, takes all the things that we don't need to go around out of the way, and it makes everything simple. So that was my Don Miguel Ruiz moment. If you haven't read The Fifth Agreement, I highly suggest. That's one of my top 5. Thank you, John. Anybody else? That good? Okay. That is it. And tomorrow is going to be about divine essence. So that's my favorite topic. So thank you everyone for joining, and please do the reflection and stay connected with the emails that will be sent out. And if you're in the Facebook group, thank you for joining live, watching replay, and I'll see you tomorrow or next time. And Saturday, 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, I'll be doing the experiential. So thank you so much for joining. And if you have any
Great.
question that come up later, feel free to reach out to me, however way that you know how to connect with me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.